Well, 3 days after the German election, and we are seeing the first major move aimed at forming a new government. And no surprise, it is a reshuffling that has to do with the money. Today, Germany's Wolfgang Schäuble, one of Europe's most respected political leaders, said that he is willing to give up his position as finance minister and become president of the parliament. Schäuble is credited with steering Germany and the Eurozone through the Euro crisis. Now, the vacancy at the finance ministry gives Chancellor Merkel a coveted cabinet position to dole out in the upcoming coalition talks. Well, today in Berlin, the chancellor met with her cabinet. It was the first meeting since Sunday's election. Voters kept Merkel's conservative CDU-CSU in power as the largest political party, but support dropped compared to the last election. That has weakened Merkel and at the same time emboldened the far-right party, the AfD, which on Sunday became the first far-right party elected to parliament in this country in 60 years. Well, the German Chancellor does not have an easy task as she looks at the start of an historic fourth term. Not only does she have to build a new government with a coalition of parties that have little in common, but she will also begin sharing parliament with some 90 lawmakers aimed at disrupting the system in the spirit of Donald Trump and Brexit. Well, today here in Berlin, the New York Times columnist Roger Cohen said that Angela Merkel's last major task as leader of Germany will be to shore up the country and the European Union against the corrosive effects of Donald Trump's populist movement. The American Academy and Telefonica Base Camp Berlin invited Cohen to speak today on Trump, Merkel, fake news, and the digital dilemma facing voters. The talk today was part of Telefonica's Digi Minds series. And I had the honor of leading that discussion today with Roger Cohen. Roger joins me now here at the big table. Roger, it's good to have you on.
Good to see you again,
Brent.
Good
to see you again, too. In your piece yesterday, we want to show our viewers what you wrote in the New York Times. You wrote, "A dozen years in power is a lot. Merkel is weary. Germans, too. It's a time for a last act. Merkel, given Trump, has said that Europe must take our destiny into our own hands. That must be her last act." What do you think Merkel's last act should look like in concrete terms?
Well, first of all, I think a fourth term is extraordinary. She's already a giant of post-war German politics. But her last victory was a bitter victory. It came at the same time as a rightist party gained some 94 seats in the German Bundestag, a party that says Wehrmacht soldiers from World War II should be honored and has bigoted views about foreigners coming into Germany. So it was a bitter victory. But she has a mandate, and we've had a 100-minute speech yesterday from President Emmanuel Macron of France proposing the rebirth, refoundation of the European Union. And I think that has to be one essential foundation of her last term, because there is a backlash in Europe. There's a backlash against Brexit, against Donald Trump, and there's kind of a resurgence of feeling about Europe and the need for European strength and integration. So that's certainly one element.
Would you say that Donald Trump was a winner in the German election on Sunday?
I wouldn't say he's a winner, but I would say that the fact that Donald Trump is the president of the United States and the fact that he comes out with these anti-immigrant comments and clearly favors a white America, if you like. He's kind of released, I would say, Brent, everybody's inner bigot. Taboos have fallen. Things that couldn't be said can now be said. And it is the right around the world that has the wind in its sails. The autocratic tendencies that are threatening Western democracies are real, and there are real reasons for it. People are angry. They're angry about growing inequality. They're angry about impunity for the rich. They're angry about a lot of things. And we've seen in Germany that even in a country where the economy is going well, where unemployment is very low, where there are surpluses, that fear of the future, of globalization, will my children be able to make it? That fear is there. And that fear and that anger are behind the FD getting almost 6 million votes.
I want you to take a listen to what one of the top candidates of the AfD said on election night as his party celebrated, and then what he said 2 days later. Take a look.
As we're clearly the third strongest party, the German government, whichever way it is formed, should dress warmly. We will hunt them. We will hunt Mrs. Merkel or whoever, and we will take our country and our people back again. The election campaign is over. We know we have a great responsibility in Parliament also towards the people who voted for us. Obviously, the language during the election campaign is different from the one used in Parliament. That's obvious.
So the language in the campaign is different than the one used in Parliament. I mean, double speak, right? Is that the double speak that we know from the Trump White House?
Yeah, I don't think Herr Gauland can really have it both ways. I mean, hunt is a very aggressive term. There's blood in there somewhere. And there's also blood in the word Volk, the way he's using it. German bloodlines, a folkish view of the country. This is not Bevölkerung, the people who live in Germany. This is the German bloodline. And, you know, the campaign was already over when he said that. He'd won.
Yeah, they'd won.
He'd won. So it's not like he was campaigning at that point. He was making a point about what he was going to do. Then he steps back, he moderates. This is absolutely familiar by now with Donald Trump, who is forever tweeting or saying outrageous things. I mean, most recently that NFL football players, if they don't stand for the national anthem, and if instead they choose to protest by kneeling, they should be fired. You're fired, of course, his favorite phrase from his TV show.
The Apprentice,
and
yeah.
now he's beginning to try and step away from that a little, and he's been criticized by close friends. And having Donald Trump as president is a head-spinning experience. He wants people to be disoriented, and looking for a logic in Donald Trump's policies, behavior, is generally speaking a futile exercise. So we're used to that, and I think that disorientation has a purpose, because when you're disoriented, don't know truth from lies, you begin to think the leader is the sole font of truth.
Yeah, that's a good point. I want to ask you about Russian meddling in the U.S. election. How do you explain Russia in the U.S. elections and Russia not being involved in the German election? There's been no report from the Secret Service or from the BND, the NSA, no one saying that they tried to manipulate this election.
Well, maybe President Putin has fond memories of his years in Germany. I'm not sure what the exact explanation is, Brent. I mean, clearly in the United States and with Brexit, the Russians saw an opening. To have Donald Trump as president, somebody who's anti-EU, initially at least anti-NATO, and so serves Russia's strategic purpose, and saw a chance of victory for Brexit. There wasn't really here, I think, a chance of the far right winning. The far right did well, so investing those kinds of resources with the criticism that would have come, and Germany, of course, for a lot of reasons, including economic reasons, is a very important country for Russia. So I guess the assessment in the Kremlin was it wasn't worth the cost.
What happens to Germany, what happens to the European Union if Chancellor Merkel fails to build a new government and new elections are called?
Well, that would be a long delay in the kinds of things Europe needs. It needs to move forward on reform, greater integration, more democracy, and that would be very unfortunate. I don't think it's going to happen. Germans have long experience in forming coalitions that are difficult. Clearly, there are differences of policy between the Free Democrats and the Greens, including over Europe. So those would have to be resolved. But we know already that Chancellor Merkel is a very patient negotiator, and I would bet that she will get there.
You worked here in Berlin. You covered the country at the end of the 90s, at the beginning of this century. And when you compare the way the political system is here with the United States, how do you explain the fact that the rhetoric here is not as brutal, the willingness to compromise and consensus is higher? How do you explain that level of willingness to talk to each other with what we see in the States as a lot of yelling and shouting?
That's a good question, Brent. You know, Germany has a history. Germany knows what it is to fracture. Germany knows what cataclysm is. Germany has been at Stunde Null. And I don't think, even though we're now more than 70 years from all that, I don't think that it's forgotten. It's somewhere in the German bones, in the German psyche. And I think even though now we do see a far-right party with almost 13% of the vote, I think the realization that a certain level of solidarity, a certain level of consensus is necessary to the functioning of any democratic society. And if you fail that test, the risks are very great. I think that is present here in a way it's not in the US. There are also differences in terms of broadcasting, in terms of the degree to which people are watching. You know, in the United States today, everybody's in their ideological canyon. They go to the network or the website that comforts them in what they already believe. And the divisions in American society are very harsh and very worrying.
New York Times columnist Roger Cohen here at the big table with us tonight. Roger, a pleasure to have you on the show. Come back. We'd like to talk with you again.
Thank you very much, Brent.